Do you ever have something happen in your life and you feel like you're the only one? You're the only one that has that struggle, that fear, that insecurity, that doubt. When I was in an unhealthy marriage, I remember thinking, nobody else is dealing with this kind of thing. Nobody else is living this like duality, this life behind closed doors that looks one way and a life that looks totally different on the outside. But that wasn't necessarily true. And then I thought about also when I first became a single mom, how everything was so stinking big. The tiniest little thing was so big to me. I remember I had a printer that broke, and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. I can't call them and talk to them because I don't know the grammar of the subject. They're going to ask me a question. I'm not going to know. It was just this huge, big deal thing, a big, ridiculous fear. But to me, it was real. We all have different life circumstances in midlife. It might be our finances. It could be our career, relationships, health. But underneath it all, we all wrestle with the same struggles. And the good news, God goes before us, and He's given us several examples to lean on. Hi, friends. Welcome to Taking Back Happy. I'm your host, Gina Granville, God's girl, retired homeschool mom of 4, empty nester, Gigi, essential oil and exercise enthusiast, Christian life coach, and someone who's taken back her own happy. I know many of you feel exactly like me in these midlife years, a sort of loss of direction, but way too young and vibrant to sit on the porch and just watch life go by. What if you could reimagine your life, finding deep joy, renewed passion, and purpose, and plenty of adventure in these midlife years? If you're ready to rediscover God's joy and purpose in this season of life, throw on those walking shoes, pop in those earbuds, and join me right here as we take back happy together. Hey, my Taking Back Happy friends. So today we're going to be looking at how we are more alike than we think. We're going to look at 3 main things. We're going to look at how we all face fear of the unknown. That's always a really big one for us. We all wrestle with insecurity and comparison, and we all struggle with doubt. I don't like to use words like all and always and never, things like that. But in this case, I think these are some pretty common struggles that are universal to us, especially during this time in our life. So let's look at the first point. We all face fear of the unknown. I feel like that is pretty universal, but especially in this time in our lives, because we're kind of like at that in-between phase. We've had those changes of like our kids leaving home. We might be starting a new career completely. We might be switching over from what we did for years and, starting a business. There might be financial changes. There could be relationship changes. There could be health concerns. All those things have unknowns attached to them. Right now, I'm sitting with a huge unknown in front of me. And I do have to admit, I have a little fear there. The only thing that's really helped me a lot is I've been praying about it and, seeking which direction I should go and how I should navigate these changes. And the Lord has just really encouraged me. And He did that the other day through a Bible devotion that I read daily. And it's just a little simple thing. But that day, it was like every line I underlined. So I recently switched jobs because I loved the job where I was at before, but I wanted to have something that had a little more consistent hours. And I wanted more days off. I want to be able to travel and go see my grandson and all those things. So anyway, I ended up taking this new job. It had better benefits, more days off, all that sort of thing, more consistent patients coming in. I loved all the people who were there, everything about it. However, I did not like the position. Within like 3 days, I realized I don't like this. I don't enjoy this. It was too sedentary for me. It wasn't enough people to chit chat with. And I have to be around people. And that's why I really, really loved my other job because I loved the people that I worked with. And I also loved all the patients because I had plenty of time to sit there and chit chat with them and find out about their lives. And it just really super encouraged me. So as of today, I am currently unemployed. And of course, that brings a little bit fear and apprehension with it. I have already made the phone calls and I'm starting to, check out all my possibilities. And of course, one of those possibilities is going back to where I was. So I'm waiting to hear back on that. But as I said before, the Lord does go before us, and God's given us lots of examples of people who have gone through the same sort of things, and especially like the fear of the unknown. So, one of the examples I was thinking about was Joshua. When Joshua was going to be stepping into like Moses, like his role as leader, he felt terrified. I mean, can you imagine having to be the person that follows up Moses? That would be very intimidating. God told him, he said, "Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will go with you wherever you go." I love that verse. Since struggling with fear is something most of us either are wrestling with now or will wrestle with at some point, I just want to encourage you to take time and just think about how am I going to fight this? Because we know if even if we don't have anything going on right now, there will be a time when we have some kind of fear or some kind of, situation that we're facing and where there's an unknown. So, what if we actually named that fear? What if we wrote it down in a journal and we kind of gave that back to God because He gives us like verses that are so encouraging. And the verse I would say here that would really help would be, "When I am afraid, I put my trust in you." That's Psalm 56:3. Something so simple. When I am afraid, I put my trust in you. Another thing we wrestle with is insecurity and comparison. And I think that is just real. I guess the comparison is huge all through life, but that insecurity and comparison duo hits us big time in midlife, especially when we're empty nesters and we're trying to figure out, who we are and where we're going from here. A lot of times midlife brings kind of those identity shifts, like who am I if I'm not Laura's mom? Who am I if I'm not so and so's spouse? Who am I if I'm not sitting behind that desk anymore? If you caught the podcast last week where I was interviewing my friend Donna and we were talking about empty nesting, that was such a big deal for me. I was like, really, who am I if I'm not a basketball mom and a dance mom and a homeschool mom and all those things? I was so wrapped around the spindle with that. And now with social media, the influence of social media, everything's changed. Because I think of the old show my kids liked to watch when they were younger. It was called Monk. And he's like, "It's a blessing and a curse." And that's kind of how social media is, right? It's a blessing and a curse. There's so many awesome things about it. It's a great way to connect with people and stay in touch with people and, do business things and, share life. But it's also a curse. It's also a big old comparison trap. And so a lot of times we can get on there, especially as women in this stage of life, and we're seeing everybody else has it all together. Everybody else has, started a new business, or they're a grandparent, or they're traveling, or they're this or that. Or as a single person, I look at all the married couples and I'm like, wow, they have someone to do this with, or they have someone to grow old with. So it can really mess with your mind if you let it. It can steal your peace if you let it, but we're not going to let it. God gives us several examples of people who struggled with insecurity and comparison. And one example was Gideon. If you remember when we first learn about Gideon, he's like hiding. He felt really small, he felt really weak, and yet God called him a mighty warrior. He probably was like looking behind him, like, who is God talking to? Before he ever did anything brave, God called him a mighty warrior. So that was pretty cool. God calls those things that are not as though they were. And he sees our potential sometimes long before we ever see our potential. So I just want to encourage you to, try to reframe that identity. Not wife, not mom, not employee, not empty nester. Those are not what we're going to look at ourselves first. We're going to look at ourselves as beloved daughter of God, as a child of God, as God's girl, whatever you want to say. But if we see it through those eyes first, then it's not going to matter what we're doing this season in life. We're just blessed to be here and be able to, connect with others and make a difference in this world, right? It's not what we do that makes us who we are. It's whose we are. We can remind ourselves of that with the verse in Psalm 139:14. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. And just kind of repeating that to ourselves. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. It doesn't matter if I'm sitting behind a big desk at a corporation, or if I have a baby on my lap, or if I'm just randomly doing nothing. If I'm taking a walk down the street, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. The last thing that we struggle with is doubt. And I feel like this one's a little bit different than fear, and it's a little bit more insidious. It comes in so quickly. One minute, we're like on the top of the world, our faith is through the roof, things are going great. And the next minute, we're like, ooh, I don't know. Can I really do this? Am I supposed to be doing that? Was that the decision I was supposed to make? That's exactly what happened to me when I realized I didn't like the new job, because I was 100% sure that God opened this door for me. I felt like from beginning to end that he had orchestrated this. When I first even went to the job to, check out and see what was going on and see if I could connect with someone there, they were already closed for the day. And this guy was pulling out of his parking space when I walked up to the door, and he pulled back in and he stopped and he asked me, hey, can I help you with something? And I was like, yeah, I was coming here to apply for the job. He's like, oh, hold on. And so he literally took me in the back door, introduced me to the office manager and the people that were still in the office. And I was like, oh, yeah, God is just lining this whole thing up for me. So when it fell through, it didn't fall through, but when I decided it wasn't the right job for me, I was so questioning, like, did I really hear God? Did God really, set this up for me? I had all these doubts. I think a big doubt that many of us tend to struggle with at this point in our life is, does God still have a purpose for me in this season? Did I miss my chance? Are those days behind me? As I've said before, when my kids graduated and moved out, I really did believe my best days were behind me. But like, how depressing is that? Think about it. Like, you're 40, 50 years old and you're thinking, oh, my best days are behind me, when you still have maybe 30, 40 more years to go. And we want to have a purpose. We want to connect with other people. We want to make a difference in this world. We don't want to have that thought like, oh, I missed the boat, or those days are gone, or it's too late for me now, I'm too old. All those things that come in, all those little insidious doubts that undermine us. A perfect biblical example is Sarah. Sarah, she literally laughed at God when he said she was going to have a baby at her age, but she really doubted because of her age. And yet, even with her, like, whatever you want to call that, her attitude, her response, God kept his promises. And he did bring laughter into her life. He did bring that joy into her life when he gave her a baby when she was that old. I want us to remember that doubt doesn't disqualify us. Sarah's doubt didn't disqualify her from God's promise. And it's the same for us. Instead of letting that doubt creep in and undermine us, we can use it as a catalyst. We can use it as a doorway into a deeper faith where we lean more on God, where we see God's truth and his direction even more. So my Taken Back Happy friends, we all have different stories and we all have the same struggles. Again, I'm using that word all, but I would say, but that's okay because we all have the same faithful God who is with us all the time. Exodus 14:14 says, "The Lord will fight for you, and you need only to be still." I love that. We don't have to figure it all out. We don't have to overcome the fear of the unknown, the insecurity and comparison, or the doubt. We just have to trust in God. We just have to be still and know that he is God. And trust ourselves, knowing, yep, the struggle is real, but you got this, my friend. We got this together. If this podcast blessed and encouraged you today, I'd love for you to share it with your friends. You can take a screenshot and share it in your stories, but make sure you tag me at Gina Granville so we can connect. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Make sure you join my Taken Back Happy Facebook group. I'll meet you back here soon, and we'll continue taking back happy together.